If you're a Dark Tower fan, get ready because today's video is gonna blow your mind. Stephen King's universe is packed with all kinds of wild stuff, but nothing holds it all together quite like the Guardians of the Beams. 12 insanely powerful creatures that literally keep the multiverse from falling apart. Think your job is tough? Wait till you hear what these Guardians have to deal with just to keep reality itself from crumbling. But before we jump in, quick favor, if you enjoy our content, hit that subscribe button. It's just a small click for you, but it means the world to us. Thanks a ton. Now let's get into it. The concept of the beams and why do they need guardians? In the universe of the Dark Tower series, the 6 beams act like the living force of the Dark Tower. Each of the 6 beams go through each other at their central point, and that is where the Dark Tower is situated. This is because the beams are maintaining the integrity of space, dimension, time, and size. They are the physical forces that hold the Dark Tower together. Don't confuse these beams with objects because they are indeed living entities and they are all brothers. You just can't see them like a steel bar because they're invisible high-tension wires. Although, if you're standing on the path of a beam, then you can definitely sense it. These beams are as old as the Dark Tower because, just like Gan, at the beginning of the universe, even they originated from the primordial chaos known as the Prim. Since they're connected to the Dark Tower at their central point, they kind of form a wheel around the tower with 12 spokes. Each of these 12 spokes of the 6 beams also has a portal anchored at its end, which leads in and out of Midworld, but possibly also has other mysteries. In Book 3 of the Dark Tower series, The Wastelands, when asked, Roland Deschain said that he is not sure where the 12 portals lead, but perhaps they go nowhere and everywhere. In any case, it has been heavily implied that these portals are of vital importance. Now, since the beams are holding the Dark Tower together, and at their ends there are powerful magical portals, it's necessary that they're protected at all costs. So, for that purpose, at the end of each beam, there is a guardian who stands and protects it. These 12 guardians of the beams appear in the form of animals, which we'll discover later in this video. Before we find out more specific details about each of them, let us tell you about how these guardians are no longer just magical creatures. Eons ago, the Great Old Ones, the technological wizards, tried to replace a lot about the Dark Tower with man-made technology. In that same attempt, they decided to fuse the magical guardians with their machinery and turn them into giant-sized cybernetic animals. This was all possible due to the work of North Central Positronics, a company during the era of the Great Old Ones which specialized in creating robots. Since the 12 guardians are cyborg creatures, they all have a thinking cap attached at the top of their heads which acts as a second brain. They also have radar dishes coming out of their skulls. Let us now take a look at who these 12 guardians of the beams actually are. Maturin the Turtle. The turtle guardian named Maturin is possibly one of the most important guardians in the Dark Tower universe. We don't get much description of his physical cyborg from the books, but it has been heavily implied that he's powerful and grand in size. The name Maturin comes from a fictional character known as Stephen Maturin, who was a physician and a naturalist in Patrick O'Brien's novel series, Aubrey Maturin. Now, you might be wondering why it was that they gave a human being's name to a giant turtle. Well, this is because Stephen Maturin discovered a brand new species of giant tortoise. We know, turtles and tortoises aren't the same, but the important thing to remember here is that all tortoises are in fact turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises. In King's book series, Maturin has existed for a very long period of time and has been around since even before the creation of the mainstream universe in Stephen King's works. He's affiliated with the White, which is the force of good within the Dark Tower universe. He has always helped out the people of the White, whose collective motive is the protection of the beams. Apart from that, the turtle has a much larger role in Stephen King's multiverse. Even before we meet him in the series, we hear a poem about him which mentions, "See the turtle of enormous girth, on his shell he holds the earth." This poem makes it clear to us that Maturin played an equally essential role in the creation of the multiverse to Gan, the godlike spirit of the Dark Tower who rose from the waters of the Prim. It's said that one time, Maturin had a stomach ache and then vomited out the mainstream universe which exists in Stephen King's multiverse. In his Dark Tower universe, we know that Gan bore the world, but when the world came into creation and fell, it was the turtle, Maturin, who caught it on his back and saved everything from falling into the dark abyss. In the 4th book of the series, titled Wizard in Glass, Roland Deschain was trapped inside the sphere known as Merlin's grapefruit. During this time, he heard the voice of Maturin the turtle who was speaking to him. Maturin told Roland that when he reaches the Dark Tower, it will remain shut for him because during his journey to the tower, he'll end up killing everyone and everything he ever cared about. Perhaps this was a little foreshadowing about the last book. Later in the journey, he and his quartet were helped by the turtle in the form of an object. Maturin left them a magical object known as a Skoldpada that contains some of his powers. The Skoldpada is basically a scrimshaw turtle. The quartet found this magical item in the 6th book of the series titled Song of Susanna. The Skoldpada is extremely old and has a bunch of powers like being able to hypnotize the person who sees it, erasing memories, or even playing mind tricks with you. The quartet were able to use this magical object to fight against the forces of the Crimson King, low vampires, and low men. In the book series, Maturin the turtle had an aura similar to a grandfather and was always gentle, kind, and loving. We also meet the same turtle in Stephen King's novel It. In this novel as well, Maturin appeared as the all-powerful being who helped out Bill in his fight against the creature, It. His character is the best example for us to realize how King interconnects all of his different worlds. Shardik the bear. See the bear of fearsome size, all the worlds within his eyes. That is what people say about Shardik the bear. He is, in a way, a companion to the turtle Maturin, since they are both guardians of the same beam, which is known as bear-turtle beam. However, Shardik's story is a bit more painful and sad compared to that of Maturin. Before we get into the lore about him, let's take a look at where his name originates. In 1974, an English novelist, Richard Adam, published a novel by the name Shardik. This novel was about a hunter and an enormously large bear who was known to have the power of God. This bear, who was described as being twice as tall as men, was named Shardik. Stephen King always appreciated and liked Adam's works, which is why we can clearly see influences of him on King. In fact, there's another reference to Adam's work in the Dark Tower series. When Eddie Dean finds out that the cyborg bear's name is Shardik, he says that it reminds him of rabbits. These rabbits pay homage to an adventure novel by Adam titled Watership Down, which was all about the journey of a company of rabbits. Now, let us look at Shardik the bear in the Dark Tower series. Unlike Maturin the turtle, we get to see Shardik the bear in all of his cyborg glory. He's about 70 feet tall, so naturally he looks even bigger than other giant creatures we've seen. In fact, in the entire Great Western Woods, he's the largest creature. He also has a sort of metallic cap and a satellite dish attached at the top of his head, which is known as a thinking cap. Now, centuries ago, before the events of the Dark Tower series, Shardik had another name. After the destruction of the Great Old Ones, the tribal people who used to live in the woods that he inhabited named him Mir, which in their language means the world beneath the world. They saw him not as a god, but as a shadow of a god as well as a demon incarnate. Just like Maturin the turtle, it's highly possible that at one point in time there existed a non-cybernetic form of Shardik, since he also originated from the Prim like the other guardians. We meet Shardik the bear for the first time in the 3rd book of the Dark Tower series, titled The Wastelands. According to Roland, he is 2,000 or 3,000 years old, and it's possible that he's still standing tall and functioning due to his internal nuclear power source. But since he is a combination of magical and machine elements, he shows severe deterioration by the time Roland and his quartet cross paths with him. The machine parts of his body, like the thinking cap, had worn out and showed signs of rust. There were also infestations of white worms within his body. All of these conditions made the bear highly unstable and insane, so it was bad luck for Roland to meet him, but highly essential to the overall plot of the story. Roland and his quartet had set up camp in the woods where Shardik was living. When he notices their arrival, he shows signs of hallucination and delusion as he assumes them to be the troublesome fire starters with whom he had dealt long ago in the past. Driven mad due to his biological conditions, Shardik decides to kill all of them. He runs after Eddie, and that might have been the end of him, but help arrives in the form of Roland using his brain and Susanna using her newly adapted gunslinger skills. Roland recalled having heard a story about the 12 guardians of the beams as a child and how they all had metal thinking caps on their heads. Considering that to be Shardik's weak spot, Susanna uses all of her skills and shoots the thinking cap. This kills the bear, and the quartet are saved. Now, if you're wondering how they realized that Shardik was one of the Guardians, well, before taking a shot at him, they had only guessed at it. After his death, when they inspected, they realized that Shardik was in fact the Bear Guardian of the Beam. This encounter was especially vital for the plot to progress, since Roland had been looking for Guardians for a very long time. Due to Shardik, they were able to discover the beginning of the beam that he was protecting by following his back trail. Now that they had discovered the beam, they were able to start the final trek to the Dark Tower. You might be wondering, if a Guardian dies, isn't his beam also destroyed? So how was this beam still intact? Well, it's safe to say that the powers and efforts of Maturin the Turtle prevented the beam from collapsing. For the rest of the book series, Roland and his quartet travel along the bear-turtle beam. This means that they were on the beam of the bear and the path of the turtle. Garuda the Eagle. The Eagle Guardian of the Beam is known as Garuda. Unlike the Bear Guardian, we never actually meet the Eagle, and very little is explained about him in the books. One thing that we know for certain is that he was given the name Garuda after the large mythical eagle who appears in Hindu mythology as the mount of the Hindu god Vishnu. Now, if you recall, Stephen King published the 8th book of the series in 2012 titled The Wind Through the Keyhole. Despite being the 8th book, in the chronological sequence of the Dark Tower series, the story falls somewhere between the 4th and 5th books. It is in this book that we hear mention about Garuda the Eagle through the tale of the protagonist, Tim Ross. Roland Deschain tells us his story in this book, where we find out that Tim Ross was on a quest to keep his mother, Nell Ross, safe. Big Kells, Tim's stepfather, beat Nell to the point that she was left blind. So, Tim goes on a journey to ask for help from the ageless strangeler, Merlin, who's a powerful sorcerer from the Prim. After completing his quest, Tim used a magic dibbon to fly back home. This dibbon is a magical cloth that basically functions like a flying carpet, but it's not the cloth that has the power. Tim is able to use it to fly due to one of Garuda's feathers. This is when we realize that the eagle's guardian feathers have the magical powers of levitation that can be granted to the one using them. Garuda also has another name, which is Telly Kelly. Aslan the Lion. The lion guardian of the beam is known as Aslan, and you might be able to guess where that name came from. The famous book series, The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, had a lion named Aslan in it, who was a metaphor for Jesus. That was the inspiration for the name of King's guardian lion. He's the guardian of the same beam as Garuda the Eagle, so naturally we hear about him in the book The Wind Through the Keyhole. During Tim Ross's journey, he travels and follows Aslan's beam for 50 miles, when he meets a tiger trapped inside a cage. He sets the tiger free and gives him a magical liquid which transforms him back to his original state, which is that of Merlin. Upon further explanation, it's revealed that Merlin was deceived by one of the agents of the Crimson King. The agent, while not strong enough, probably turned him into a tiger because he could not possibly duplicate a beam guardian. In the same book, it's also revealed to us that if Aslan the lion is still alive, then he lives in the land of endless snow. Now, let me take you to the Tahine with the head of a weasel known as Finley Otigo. He mentions a legend about a bleeding lion who has been stalking the north. It's highly possible that this bleeding lion is none other than Aslan the Guardian. If you're wondering why he would be bleeding, well, the story checks out, because in the 7th book, The Dark Tower, Roland and his quartet felt a beamquake, which is basically like an earthquake that occurs when any of the beams are destroyed. These are infinitely more damaging than an earthquake because the fall of a beam leads to the destruction of any cities or civilizations on its path. This beamquake that was felt by them was caused by the fall of the Eagle Lion beam, which is also one of the first beams to fall. Roland's home, Gilead, was on the path of the Eagle Lion beam, so it was partially destroyed as a result of this fall. Chuchundra the Rat. Let us now take a look at another beam, which is guarded by Chuchundra the Rat on one end and by Jasconius the Fish on the other. The Rat Guardian is one of the guardians of the beams who has been honored for centuries. In fact, he even has his own following. The inhabitants of the northern region of Inworld, who are known as the Nordite people, have worshipped him since the beginning of their civilization. This is because it was Chuchundra the Rat who brought and introduced the Nordite people to barley seeds. He even taught them how to cultivate it so that they would never fall short. As for his nature and character, Chuchundra is widely known for his act of sharing knowledge with human beings, as well as for his sharp intelligence. Jasconius the Fish. The beam counterpart of Chuchundra the Rat is Jasconius the Fish. There is very little information provided about the Fish Guardian in the book series, although we do get to see a huge chrome and crystal fish statue, which is representative of Jasconius. This happened when Jake was running through the cradle of the Greys. There is a word of high speech written under the Fish Guardian statue, which is delight. In the Dark Tower series, in the final book, we realize that apart from the Eagle Lion beam, the Rat Fish beam has also been destroyed. Camazotz the Bat. The next beam is guarded by Camazotz the Bat on one end and Owsla the Hare on the other. While it might sound like a strange name, the Bat Guardian's moniker comes from Mayan mythology, which is a part of Mesoamerican. In Mayan mythology, Camazotz means death bat. Owsla the Hare. Hares are quite similar to rabbits, even though they don't come from the same animal species. The biggest similarity between them is that they look a little alike, except hares are bigger in size, have longer ears, and larger hind legs. You might be wondering what that has to do with Owsla the Guardian of the Beam. Well, it's in his name. Earlier in the video, we already saw the influence of Richard Adams on Stephen King's work. Owsla the Hare is another example of that influence. The name of this guardian pays homage to Adams's novel, Watership Down. In this novel, Owsla is the name of a group of rabbits who appear as the policemen of the warren. Even their authority level seems similar to Owsla the Hare since he is guarding one of the beams. The Bat Hare beam was another beam that has been broken by the forces of the Crimson King over the course of the Dark Tower series. Garm the Dog. The fifth beam connected to the Dark Tower is known as the Dog Horse Beam, which is guarded by Garm the Dog on one end and Rocinante the Horse on the other end. As is usually the nature of dogs, even Garm is known for his compassion and loyalty towards human beings. In fact, it was Garm the dog who took the people of Kashmini to an ancient temple far away that housed an ancient weapon known as the nunchaku. This Kashmini nunchaku is an incredibly powerful weapon that the gunslingers are taught to use. Its counterpart on the Keystone world is possibly the nunchucks. The Kashmini people have so much faith in Garm that they believe that just like finding the nunchaku, Garm will also take them to the Pure Land if they are consistently devoted in their lives. Rocinante the horse. The beam counterpart of Garm the dog is Rocinante the horse. His name comes from the name of Don Quixote's horse in Miguel de Cervantes' novel of the same name, which was published in 1605. In Spanish, the term Rocin means a workhorse, and this is in line with the legend about Rocinante, the guardian, as he is known to have a stoic nature and is determined in everything he does. It is also said that after an attack led by Edoacer Grissom, the warrior general of a Troitan tribe, Rocinante's followers drastically declined. Roland and the quartet reach the Devar Toy, the place where the Breakers are being kept in the last book of the Dark Tower series. For those who might need a reminder, the Breakers are a group of psychics who are working for the Crimson King. Their sole purpose is the destruction of all the beams so that the Crimson King can destroy the Dark Tower. Now, at this point in the story, out of all the 6 beams that are connected to the Dark Tower, 4 have already fallen due to the Breakers. Along with the other 3 fallen beams that have been mentioned before in this video, the last beam to fall was the Dog-Horse beam. Navius the wolf and Babar the elephant. Apart from the bear turtle beam, the only other beam that's left standing and intact by the end of the story is the wolf elephant beam. This beam is guarded on one end by Navius the wolf and on the other by Babar the elephant. Not much is disclosed about this beam in the book series, except for the fact that it's known as Gan's beam. Since the other 4 beams have collapsed, it's safe to assume that their 8 cybernetic guardians have also died. From the remaining 2 beams, we already know that Shardik the bear is killed, but since the wolf elephant beam is still entirely intact, it is possible that their cybernetic physical forms are still alive in the midworld. Luckily, in the end, Roland and his quartet managed to defeat the Breakers and the Crimson King and saved the beams. We later find out that even though the 4 beams have been destroyed, they can still regenerate over time. This means that, in the end, peace will be restored once more for the civilizations along their paths. Marvelous verdict! Well guys, with that, we've come to the end of yet another marvelous video. The Guardians of the Beams are special creatures who add so much depth to the entire lore about the Dark Tower. Although, if you think about it, their life does seem to be a bit like Albert Camus's Sisyphus, since just like him, even all 12 of them are tasked with protecting the beams of the Dark Tower till the end of time. Imagine having to do the same tedious task for eternity. But we all owe a big thanks to the 12 Guardians, because if they didn't protect the beams, the Dark Tower would fall. And as a result, every world and everything would cease to exist. So, which Guardian out of the 12 is your favorite? Whose story did you like the most? Do you wish Stephen King would write a separate book surrounding their lives? And what else from the Dark Tower universe would you like us to explore next? We're always looking for new ideas for videos. Let us know all about it in the comments down below, and if you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. It means the world to us when you help us grow. Until next time, guys, this is goodbye. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.